we're thinking, what do we do on this? At this point, the second most powerful official in the country, Helen McNamara, is the Deputy Cabinet Secretary. She walked into the office while we're looking at this whiteboard. She says, I've just been talking to the official, Mark Sweeney, who is in charge of coordinating with the Department for Health. He said, quote, I've been told for years that there is a whole plan for this. There is no plan. We're in huge trouble. I've come through here to the, Helen McNamara said, I've come through here to the Prime Minister's office to tell you all, quote, I think this country is heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people. On this crazy day of the 12th, we're sitting in the Prime Minister's office. The Cabinet, we're talking about the herd immunity plan. The Cabinet Secretary said, Prime Minister, you go on TV tomorrow and explain to people the herd immunity plan and that it's like the old chickenpox parties. We need people to get this disease because that's how we get herd immunity by September. And I said, Mark, you've got to stop using this chickenpox analogy. It's not right. And he said, why? And Ben Warner said, because chickenpox is not spreading exponentially and killing hundreds of thousands of people. And you could sense in the whole room there was this kind of shock. And it was only really at that moment that we realised, and Mark, now, to stress, this wasn't some weird thing that the Cabinet Secretary had come up with. He was saying what the official advice to him from the Department of Health was. You've got to chair the daily meetings in the Cabinet room, not COBRA, because the COBRA system just couldn't work. We couldn't get all the data in properly. It didn't work for a kind of open thing. So that's how the day started off, with us thinking, okay, today is going to be all about COVID and whether or not we're going to announce the household quarantine. We then got completely derailed because in the morning of the 12th, suddenly the national security people came in and said, Trump wants us to join a bombing campaign in the Middle East tonight. And we need to start having meetings about that through the day with COBRA as well. So everything to do with COBRA that day was on COVID was completely disrupted because you had these two parallel sets of meetings. You had the national security people running in and out talking about, are we going to bomb the Middle East? And we had the COBRA meeting being delayed and whatnot as we were trying to figure out, are we going to do household quarantine? And then to add to it sounds so surreal it couldn't possibly be true, that day the Times had run a huge story about the Prime Minister and his girlfriend and their dog. And the Prime Minister's girlfriend was going completely crackers about this story and demanding that the press office deal with that. So we had this sort of completely insane situation in which part of the building was saying, are we going to bomb Iraq? Part of the building was arguing about whether or not we're going to do quarantine or not do quarantine. The Prime Minister has his girlfriend going crackers about something completely trivial. In February, the Prime Minister regarded this as just a scare story. He described it as the new swine flu.
Did you tell him it wasn't?
Certainly. But the view of various officials inside Number 10 was, if we have the Prime Minister chairing COBRA meetings and he just tells everyone it's swine flu, don't worry about it, I'm going to get Chris Whitty to inject me live on TV with coronavirus so everyone realises it's nothing to be frightened of, that would not help actually serious planning. Like in much of the government system, there was many brilliant people at relatively junior and middle levels who were terribly let down by senior leadership. I think that the Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions, in meeting after meeting in the Cabinet room and publicly. I brought in Simon Case to be Permanent Secretary at Number 10 because I thought the Prime Minister's not listening to me on this whole subject. Our relations are getting worse and worse. His girlfriend is desperate to get rid of me and all my team. If I bring in someone official to kind of take over on COVID, that will A, make things better, and B, maybe he'll listen better to Simon Case than he will to me, which to some extent did happen. And then I spent a lot of my time in kind of May, June, July, not on COVID, but on defence, science and technology, procurement reform, planning regulations, the economy, productivity, innovation, data, all of the civil service, all of these sorts of things. And I tried to use what influence I had on those things where either the Prime Minister agreed with me or he didn't really care, in which case I could push things on. But it wasn't really useful me just sitting in meeting after meeting on things like quarantine, where he just didn't agree. People all over Westminster exaggerated. I think arguably they underestimated the influence that I had between July and December 2019. Arguably, they massively exaggerated the influence that I had after the election. The whole idea that I was the second most powerful person in the country and all of that, and I could just click my fingers and do this and do that and do the other, was just completely wrong. If I could have clicked my fingers and done things, there would have been a serious border policy. Masks would have been compulsory. Hancock would have been fired. We'd have done dozens and dozens and dozens of things. What happened is, fundamentally, the Prime Minister and I did not agree about COVID. We did not agree about COVID after March. After March, he thought the lesson to be learned is we shouldn't have done the lockdown, we should have focused on the economy, it was all a disaster, I should have been the Mayor of Jaws. I thought that perspective was completely mad. The officials are actually in charge of hiring and firing ABC. So as soon as you have some kind of major problem, you have, that Spiderman meme with Spiderman, both the Spidermans pointing at each other, but it's like that, but with everybody. So you have Hancock pointing at the Permanent Secretary, and you have the Permanent Secretary pointing at Hancock, and they're both pointing at the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office is pointing back at them, and all the different Spidermans are all pointing at each other, saying you're responsible. And the problem is, everyone's right and everyone's unhappy. The Prime Minister's girlfriend was trying to change a whole bunch of different appointments in Number 10 and appoint her friends to particular jobs. In particular, she was trying to overturn the outcome of an official process about hiring a particular job in a way which was not only completely unethical, but was also clearly illegal. I thought the whole process about how the Prime Minister was behaving at that point was appalling, and all of that was definitely part of why I went. However, this had all been, as I said to you, I had this conversation with him the night before my operation back in July. It was clear in July that our relations were very far from where they had been, and they took another terrible dive after the second lockdown in October, because the Prime Minister knew that I blamed him for the whole situation, and I did. And by the 31st of October, our relations were essentially already finished. The fact that his girlfriend also wanted rid of me was, relevant, but not the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem was, fundamentally, I regarded him as unfit for the job.